Sophie, be reasonable. Marcus needs stability right now. You have your fancy apartment in Atlanta. You don't even use the lakehouse anymore. It's just sitting there. My mother said this to me over the phone, while I was standing in the parking lot of a CVS in Buckhead, holding a bag of Advil and a bottle of water, 3 days into a migraine that wouldn't quit. I had just finished a 12-hour day restructuring a client's portfolio. My shoes were still on. My blazer was still buttoned. And my mother was calling to explain, very patiently, very reasonably, why my grandfather's lake house, the one he left to me in his will, the one with my name on the deed, the one where I had paid 11 consecutive years of property taxes, insurance premiums, and maintenance bills, should now belong to my brother. Before I tell you what I did about it, I need you to tell me something first. Have you ever been the responsible one in your family? The one who got the good grades, took out no loans, called on birthdays, showed up to every hospital visit, never once asked for a handout, and watched your parents pour every resource they had into someone who treated the family like a vending machine? Leave your answer in the comments. I read every single one. I need you to understand what kind of family I come from before you understand what I did to them. My grandfather, Raymond, was the only person in my family who saw me clearly. He was a retired civil engineer from Chattanooga who built things with his hands and believed that money was a tool, not a personality trait. He left me the lake house on Norris Lake and a $60,000 investment account when he died 6 years ago. He didn't leave it to my parents. He didn't leave it to my brother. He left it to me, specifically, by name, in a will he had notarized and filed with the county clerk. He told me once, over catfish and sweet tea on the back porch, that he was leaving it to me because I was the one who would actually take care of it. He said Marcus would sell it in a month and spend the money on something with a motor. He wasn't wrong. My brother is what our family calls a free spirit. What that means in practical terms is that Marcus has held 11 jobs in 9 years, borrowed money from every person in our family, including our 83-year-old Aunt Dottie, and has never once been held accountable for a single consequence of a single decision he has ever made. He is 34 years old and has the financial vocabulary of a golden retriever, but he is warm and funny, and he has my father's eyes, and my parents have been quietly funding his chaos since he was 17. I used to feel sorry for him. Then I paid off my own student loans, built a client base from nothing, and watched my parents take out a second mortgage on their house in Knoxville to bail Marcus out of a failed food truck venture, and the sympathy started drying up. By the time my mother called me in that CVS parking lot, Marcus had a new situation. His girlfriend, Cassie, was 5 months pregnant. They were living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Chattanooga that they could not afford, and my parents had decided, apparently together, apparently without mentioning it to me until after the fact, that the solution to this situation was my lake house on Norris Lake. The house has 3 bedrooms, a wraparound deck, a boat dock my grandfather built himself, and a view of the water that makes you forget everything bad that has ever happened to you. I drove up there 4 or 5 times a year. I had a key under the 3rd stone to the left of the front door. I had a hummingbird feeder on the back porch that I filled every spring. My mother said Cassie needed the stability. She said it was what Grandpa Raymond would have wanted. She said Marcus was finally growing up and just needed one solid foundation to build on. I told her the foundation had my name on the deed. She said I was being selfish. I want you to understand something about that word. Selfish. When you are the child who causes no problems, the child who never calls at 2 a.m., needing bail money, the child who sends birthday cards and attends every family function and handles her own life without burdening anyone, that word gets used against you like a weapon. You are never allowed to say no. Every boundary you set is reframed as a personal attack. Every time you protect something that is yours, you are reminded that family means sacrifice. But somehow the sacrifice always runs in one direction. I told my mother I needed to think about it. I hung up. I drove home. I took 4 Advil and went to sleep at 8:30 on a Tuesday. I did not think it would escalate to what it escalated to. That was my mistake. 3 weeks later, I drove up to Norris Lake for a long weekend. I had a bottle of wine, a bag of groceries, and a new novel I had been meaning to read for 6 months. I turned off the main road onto the gravel drive and saw Marcus's truck parked outside the front door. I thought for one confused second that maybe he had come to visit. Maybe my parents had told him I'd be here and he wanted to talk. Then I saw the curtains were different. The ones my grandfather had hung, thick green cotton that had been on those windows for 20 years, were gone. White linen ones were in their place. There was a baby swing on the front porch, still in its box, and when I knocked on my own front door, Cassie opened it wearing one of my grandfather's old flannel shirts and holding a mug of coffee like she lived there. Because she did. She looked at me with an expression that was genuinely confused and then genuinely uncomfortable. She called over her shoulder, "Marcus, your sister is here." He came around the corner, looking like a man who had been expecting this conversation, but was hoping it would come later. He had his hands in his pockets. He looked at the floor for a second, and then at me. "Look," he said, "Mom and Dad thought it would be easier if we just got settled before we told you. Cassie needs to rest. We didn't want the stress. I asked him how he got in. He said Mom had given him the spare key, the one under the stone. I stood in the doorway of the house my grandfather built and I looked at my brother and I made a decision. Not the decision I would have made if I was still 22 and afraid of the conflict. The decision I made at 31, after a decade of watching this family treat my patients like a natural resource with no bottom. I said nothing. I turned around. I got back in my car. And I called my lawyer. Her name is Miss Hargrove. She handles property and contracts, and she has a voice like a judge, and zero tolerance for nonsense. I had worked with her twice before, on investment property closings. I told her what happened. I expected her to say, let's file for eviction. She did not. She said, Sophie, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What she told me next made the road in front of me blur. Somebody had filed a quitclaim deed with the county recorder's office 14 days ago. The deed transferred ownership of the lake house from Sophie Marie Kellerman to Marcus Allen Kellerman and Cassandra Lynn Pruitt, jointly. The signature on the deed was mine, or something that was supposed to look like mine. Miss Hargrove said she had pulled the filing because when I mentioned the lake house, she always cross-checked property records before advising. She said the notary stamp was from a UPS store in Knoxville. She said the handwriting was a decent attempt, but it was not a match for my actual signature on file with the county from when I had recorded the original inheritance deed 6 years ago. Someone had forged my name and transferred my property to my brother and his girlfriend. I pulled over on the side of the road. I put my hazards on. I sat there for 4 minutes without moving. The thing about a betrayal that size is that your brain does not process it all at once. It comes in pieces. First I thought, this is a mistake. Then I thought, no it isn't. Then I thought about my mother on the phone, in that CVS parking lot, calm and reasonable, asking me to be fair. I thought about how she had called 3 times in the past 2 weeks to check in, which she never does. I thought about the curtains, the baby swing, Cassie answering the door in my grandfather's shirt like she had already been living there long enough to be comfortable. They had not been waiting for me to say yes. They had already decided. They had already moved in. The phone call was theater. Miss Hargrove told me my options. I could file a fraudulent deed claim with the county immediately, which would cloud the title and trigger a civil investigation. I could go to the police and report the forgery, which was a felony under Tennessee law. I could pursue both simultaneously. I asked her which option I should choose. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, before we do anything, I need to know if there are any financial instruments attached to this property. Has anyone tried to borrow against it? I said I didn't think so. She said, find out. I called a contact at a regional title company I had worked with professionally. I told him I needed a lien and encumbrance search on a property in Campbell County, and I needed it in 24 hours. He owed me a favor from a complicated closing we had navigated together the year before. He said he would make some calls. He called me back the next morning. There was a pending home equity loan application against the lake house, submitted 11 days ago. The lender was a mid-size regional bank in Knoxville. The application listed the property owners as Marcus Allen Kellerman and Cassandra Lynn Pruitt. The loan amount requested was $180,000. The application was still in underwriting. It had not been approved yet, but if it had been approved, my brother would have borrowed $180,000 against a house he did not own, using a deed that carried my forged signature. That is bank fraud. Federal level. The kind with mandatory minimums. I sat with that for a long time. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment, because I think people expect you to feel only anger. But what I actually felt was grief. Not for my brother. Not yet. Grief for the version of my family I had been carrying around in my head like a protective fiction. The version where they were flawed but fundamentally decent. Where my mother loved me, even if she showed it strangely. Where my father's silence was discomfort, not complicity. I had been maintaining that fiction for 31 years, and it had just cost me my grandfather's house. I called my mother. I made my voice soft. I told her I had been thinking about what she said. I told her I had been selfish, and I could see that now. I told her Marcus and Cassie deserved stability, and that family should come first. I heard her exhale. I heard the relief in it, long and slow. The relief of a woman who had been bracing for a fight, and was grateful she didn't have to have one. I said I wanted to do it right. Legally. I said I wanted everyone to sit down together and go through the paperwork with Miss Hargrove, my attorney, just to make sure the transfer was handled properly so nobody had any tax problems later. My mother said that sounded very mature. I said I was glad she thought so. I need you to understand that I was not bluffing. I was not hoping they would back down. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I had already talked through every step with Miss Hargrove the night before. She had been skeptical at first. She asked if I was sure I wanted to go this route. I told her the home equity loan was still in underwriting. I told her if they got that money before we moved, I might never see it. She said, then we move first and we move smart. We scheduled the meeting for a Saturday morning at Miss Hargrove's office in Knoxville. I told my family it was a routine property transfer signing, just paperwork to confirm what everyone had already agreed to. I told them Miss Hargrove required all parties present for the transfer. I told them to bring ID. What I did not tell them was that I had hired a forensic document examiner the week before. I did not tell them that she had submitted a sworn affidavit comparing my authentic signature on file with the county to the signature on the quitclaim deed and concluded, with a high degree of professional certainty, that the signatures were not made by the same hand. I did not tell them I had already filed a preservation notice with the county recorder flagging the deed as potentially fraudulent, which meant it was legally frozen, and the bank loan could not close. I did not tell them Miss Hargrove had already sent a courtesy notification to the lender's fraud department. I did not tell them about the court reporter. The morning of the meeting, I put on a gray blazer and flat shoes and I drove to Miss Hargrove's office on Market Street. The office is a converted Victorian building, with tall windows and dark wood floors, and nothing soft about it. I sat in a chair and I drank coffee and I waited. They arrived 12 minutes late. All four of them. My mother in a floral blouse and pressed slacks. Carrying herself like this was a pleasant formality. My father, in his Sunday jacket, the one he wears to things he wants to seem important at. Marcus in jeans and a clean button-down, which meant he was trying. Cassie in a sundress, one hand on her belly, the other linked through Marcus's arm. She looked tired. She looked like a woman who was 7 months pregnant and had been told this meeting was a good thing. I want to say something about Cassie. I had never disliked her. She was 26 and had grown up in a hard situation, and she genuinely believed that Marcus was going to be a good father. She was not the architect of any of this. She was along for a ride whose brakes had already been cut. I made a note to myself about that. I made a promise to myself about that. They sat down across from me. My mother smiled. My father nodded at the table. Marcus looked at me with an expression that was half guilt and half hope. The look of a man who wants to believe he is getting away with something and feels slightly sick about it. Miss Hargrove came in and set her briefcase on the table. She shook hands with no warmth. She sat down and opened a folder. "Before we proceed," she said, "I need to establish the nature of this meeting for the record." She gestured to the corner, without looking up. The court reporter was already at her station. My mother's smile flickered. "This is a formal legal proceeding," Miss Hargrove said. "Everything said in this room is being transcribed." She folded her hands. "Now, my client, Sophie Kellerman, has indicated she is prepared to discuss the future of the Norris Lake property. Before any document is signed, however, I am required to verify the chain of ownership and confirm the validity of all prior filings." My father cleared his throat. "We already know the chain." Raymond left it to Sophie. "Sophie is signing it over to Marcus. Simple as that." "Yes." Miss Hargrove smiled for the first time. "That is what I understand to be the desired outcome." She pulled a document from the folder and slid it across the table. "However, before my client signs anything, I need your family to sign a verification of intent. It is standard practice in contested transfers." My mother looked at the document. "What does it say?" "It says," Miss Hargrove explained, "that the prior quitclaim deed filed on March 4th with the Campbell County Recorder accurately reflects the stated wishes of all parties present, and that all signatures on that document were executed voluntarily and with full knowledge. In other words, she needed them to swear, in a formal legal proceeding, that the forged deed was real." My father picked up the pen without reading it. My mother did the same. They were already past this in their minds. They were already at the part where they had won. Marcus hesitated. He looked at me once. I held his gaze, and I did not flinch, and I did not look away, and I did not give him anything to hold on to. He picked up the pen. He signed. Miss Hargrove collected the documents. She straightened them against the table. And then she set down a second folder, thicker than the first, with a red accordion tie. "This," she said, "is the sworn affidavit of Patricia Wells, a certified forensic document examiner with 22 years of professional experience and court-qualified expert status in 14 federal jurisdictions." She slid the top page across the table. Miss Wells compared Sophie's authenticated signature on file with Campbell County from 2019 to the signature on the quitclaim deed filed on March 4th of this year. She concluded, with a high degree of professional certainty, that these signatures were not produced by the same individual. Nobody moved. Miss Hargrove placed the second document in front of them. "This is the bank loan application submitted to First Community Lenders of Knoxville on March 7th, listing Marcus Allen Kellerman and Cassandra Lynn Pruitt as owners of the Norris Lake property and requesting a home equity loan of $180,000. She let that sit for 3 seconds. "And this," she said, placing the third document, "is the verification of intent you just signed, in which you swear, under penalty of perjury, that the March 4th deed, the deed my forensic expert has just confirmed contains a forged signature, accurately reflects the genuine wishes of all parties and was executed properly." My father's face went a color I had never seen on a person. My mother put her hand over her mouth. Marcus was perfectly still. Cassie was looking between all of them with an expression that said she was beginning to understand the shape of something she had not known she was standing inside. My father lunged forward in his chair. "That handwriting expert is wrong." He pointed at the document. "You paid her to say that. That is Sophie's signature." "Sophie agreed to this." "Did she?" Miss Hargrove said. "Your daughter is sitting across from you right now. Would you like to ask her?" My father looked at me. There was anger in it, but underneath the anger was something else. something crumbling. You set us up, my mother said softly. Her voice had gone flat, all the warmth scraped out of it. I set you up, I said. Yes, you are doing this to your own family. She looked like she was going to cry, and I noticed, for the first time in my life, that her crying did not change anything I was about to do. That reflex, the one that had bent me toward her for 31 years, was simply gone. I leaned forward. I have paid the taxes on that house for 11 years. I have paid the insurance. I repaired the roof in 2021. I paid to restain the deck last summer. I drove up there 4 times a year to keep it from falling apart because it was the last thing my grandfather left, and I loved him. And while I was maintaining it, you were down here having meetings I wasn't invited to, looking up how to forge my name, and teaching my brother how to commit federal bank fraud. My mother started to speak. I did not let her. The forged deed is a felony, under Tennessee Code Section 3914114. Forgery of a deed carries up to 6 years. The bank fraud application is a federal charge, under 18 U.S.C. 1344. That one carries up to 30 years per count, and there are 2 names on that application. Miss Hargrove has already submitted notification to the lender's fraud department. The file goes to the Campbell County DA's office at 5 o'clock today, unless I tell her otherwise. Marcus made a sound. It was not words. It was the sound of a man realizing the floor had disappeared. I looked at him directly. I want to talk to you about Cassie. He flinched. I am not going to do to her what you did to me, I said. She did not forge my name. She did not apply for the loan. She is 7 months pregnant, and she does not deserve to have her child born while you are being arraigned. So here is what I have decided. Everyone was very still. The fraud charges against Marcus get filed, I said. I cannot stop that process, and I would not if I could. But I am going to call the bank myself and tell them the application was submitted without my knowledge and that I am not pursuing the fraudulent deed through the criminal court at this time. That means Cassie is not attached to a federal case. She can find housing through the county assistance program. I have already looked it up. There is a family services office on Western Avenue. They have a prenatal housing program. I made a call this morning. There is a caseworker expecting her name. Cassie looked at me. Her eyes were red. She said one word. Why? Because you didn't do this to me, I said. And because my grandfather would have hated for a baby to suffer for something that had nothing to do with her. Marcus put his face in his hands. My mother turned to me with an expression I had been waiting my whole life to never have to see directed at me, contempt dressed up as heartbreak. You are cold, she said. You are a cold, cruel woman. I thought about 11 years of property taxes. I thought about the flannel shirt. I thought about the phone call in the CVS parking lot where she asked me to be reasonable, while she already knew what they had done. No, I said. I am finished. I stood up. My legs were steady. My voice did not rise above conversational. You used my grandfather's house as a prop in a performance you were putting on for yourselves. You used the legal system in Cassie's pregnancy and every guilt reflex I have ever had, and you still needed to forge my name to make it work because you knew that I would never have said yes. Not once. Not for any version of this. And you knew that because you know who I am. You raised me. You just never respected me. I picked up my bag. The sheriff's deputy will be at the lakehouse at noon to supervise the removal of personal items, I said. Anything left after that becomes abandoned property. You have 2 hours. I walked to the door. My father said my name once in a voice I had not heard since I was a child, small and unsure of itself. I did not stop. The door clicked shut behind me. I sat in my car for 6 minutes. I did not cry. I called my contact at the title company and told him to cancel the preservation flag on the deed because the matter was proceeding through criminal channels. I called the caseworker at the county family services office and confirmed Cassie's appointment for Monday morning. I sent a text to my Aunt Dottie telling her that Marcus would likely be calling her and that she should not give him any money. Then I drove to Norris Lake. The sheriff's deputies were professional. Marcus and my mother carried boxes in silence. My father sat on the tailgate of the truck and did not help. Cassie packed a duffel bag and a laundry basket and a box of what looked like baby things she had already bought. When she passed me on the porch, she stopped and looked at me for a long moment and said, I didn't know about all of it. I want you to know that. I believed her. I told her I believed her. I told her the caseworker's name was Jennifer, and that she was kind and thorough, and would make sure Cassie had what she needed before the baby came. Cassie nodded and walked to the truck. My mother did not speak to me. My father said one thing before he got in the passenger seat. He said, You didn't have to do it like this. I thought about that for a long time afterward. I still think about it, and every time I come back to the same answer. I didn't choose how this went. They filed the deed on March 4th. I found out on March 7th. Everything after that was math. The DA's office charged Marcus with forgery and fraudulent property transfer. He accepted a plea deal 8 months later. 2 years probation, restitution to cover the legal costs I had incurred, and mandatory financial counseling. No prison time, because it was his first felony charge, and because I told the DA I did not want incarceration to be the outcome. I wanted accountability. There is a difference. And I knew my grandfather would have wanted me to know the difference. My parents have not called me. I have not called them. I don't know if we are done permanently, or just done for now. I find that I can hold that uncertainty without it hollowing me out, which is new, which is something. I went back to the lake house the following spring. I refilled the hummingbird feeder. I sat on the back porch with a glass of sweet tea, and I watched the water, and I thought about my grandfather telling me over catfish that someday the house would need someone to fight for it. He was right. He was always right. If you have ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping what is yours, you already know how this story feels from the inside. Hit subscribe and tell me in the comments. Would you have filed the charges? Or would you have let it go, for the sake of the family? I want to hear where you land. I really do.